and welcome to Sewing Miggy. My name is Megan and today we'll be learning how to make a dog bandana. What we'll need for this project. Starting off, you'll need measuring tape or string, a ruler, some fabric, woven fabric such as cotton or linen is probably best to start off with because it doesn't stretch. You can use a 2B pencil as well for marking things. Then either scissors or a rotary cutter with mat. Later on, you'll need your sewing machine, some string, cotton is fine, or polyester. Dogs don't really care. Chopstick or something long and thin to turn it inside out with. And then we want to hand sew on with a little needle and thread and these little guys. There's a little hook and eye loop.
This is my dog, Kitara. She's a little bit smaller than my other dog, but she does love to wear clothes. So we're going to measure up her neck here and see how long we need for the bandana. So place it around her neck, and you want to be giving about 2 finger widths of space between the measuring tape and her neck. So Kitara's neck width was 30 centimeters, or you could say 12 inches. Another way you could have done that if you didn't have a measuring tape is you could have just wrapped a string around the neck and then laid it out against a ruler. Next, it's time for a bit of maths that you thought you escaped from high school. So we're going to take Kitara's neck width, which was 12 inches, and to give her a bit of extra space for where the clasp will then overlap, we're going to add 3 inches on. And that gives us about 15 inches in total for our next number. Then we'll take that 15 and square it, so 15 times 15, 225 as you all know. Then we take that 225 divided by 2. So 225 divided by 2 equals 112.5. Then with that 112.5, you're going to square root that. I'm not actually a genius. I put it into Google. You can just search up square root of number 112.5, and that gave us about 10.6. So let's round that to 10.5 inches. Now, this 10.5 inches is actually going to give us the length of the square side that we want to be using for the bandana. So we already knew the diagonal is going to be 15 inches there, and that means each of the square sides will be 10.5 inches on either side. And this is the main measurement we're going to be using in order to cut out our fabric. So we've got our piece of fabric here. It's just a cotton fabric. You could probably even make do with a fat quarter as they're sold in certain fabric stores, which is about 45 centimeters by 45 centimeters if your dog is small enough. Now, here we are cutting off what we call the selfish, and that's the uneven part of the fabric. Here we've got a 2B pencil. Grab your ruler, and the number we were using was 10.5 inches from the previous calculations. So we're going to lay that ruler against the side, mark 10.5 inches there, run it up, make that 10.5 inch mark as well. The cool thing about 2B pencil is that it can actually wash out. So I'm still doing this markings on we call it the wrong side of the fabric that you're actually not going to see when you're complete. And here we can use the scissors to cut it. Now, not everyone has a rotary cutter and self-healing mat when you start out. I do love mine and I find it very useful, but a pair of scissors is just fine to begin with. Now, these are fabric scissors and they do cut quite well compared to your regular paper scissors. Alright, all the prep work's done. Let's set our length, the stitch length, to 2.8, so it's long enough that we can unpick it if we make any mistakes. Now I'm folding the right sides together, and we're going to make sure we leave about 2 inches or so of gap on one of the ends because that's what we'll be turning inside out. And placing it underneath your needle, please use a 3/8 seam allowance, which means 3/8 of an inch, and this actually equates to about 1 centimeter. And here we are, ready to go. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to stitch forward a couple of stitches, and then we're going to hold down that button, which does something called back stitching. So by holding down this button, in some machines it might be a lever, you hold it down while you're pressing your foot pedal and it sews backwards. You go about 3 stitches backwards and then go forwards again, and that just creates a nice little area where the stitches cannot unravel from. So here we are, going ahead stitching through. Once you reach the corner, you want to pivot on the needle, so you can actually lift up what we call the presser foot, leaving the needle inside there, and then swing your fabric around 90 degrees. Then place your presser foot back down and keep going. You can see my edge is a bit uneven here, but you can always trim that back later, and it's also going to be hidden inside once you turned your bandana inside out. Don't forget to do a back stitch to finish off again, and then cut and snip it off. My machine has a little trimmer at the end there. Next, we're going to be turning it inside out. Let's turn this fabric inside out now. So start by tucking it through with your fingers, and then as it gets a bit smaller and trickier, grab your chopsticks. Now you'd hope that your chopstick has a blunt end because you don't want to poke it all the way through your lovely stitching on the other corner. And just gently ease it through, kind of run it along where you've stitched to even it out. And that's it. Now, if you want to be extra thorough, you could actually go ahead and press or use an iron to flatten your bandana at this point. For the sake of keeping this video short, I just what we call finger pressed and pushed every little fold together to keep it flat. And over here at the corner, we're actually going to tuck it in so that we get a beautiful edge once we sew over the top of it. Now, we're ready to sew over the top and close that edge. I like to normally start it at that edge that we're just closing the hole of. So, it's time to sew. Rather than using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, we're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so 1/8 of an inch less. So it's actually going to be closer to the edge of your bandana. And this will just give it a really nice closure along that edge that you just folded closed previously. And then same thing once you come to the corner, lift up your presser foot, swing it around 90 degrees, and then continue sewing. And in some models, the needle might automatically go up, so you can actually use your hand dial on the right of the machine to lower the needle again before you twist it around. Well done, you finished the machine sewing part, and now it's time for the hand sewing part of this project. You're almost done. We're going to grab out our string, our little sewing needle that you actually have to thread yourself, and I'm just going to show you real quick how I normally like to do my hand sewing. So I actually double my string over, which gives it a bit more strength. Cut it off about halfway with say about an arm's length of what you need. Then we're going to thread that needle. Now you can actually use a needle threader if you like. So we're going to thread this needle next. If you like a little tip of threading it, don't look at it through your video camera, but you can actually snip the edge so it's nice and firm and straight so it goes through nicely. And do try to choose a needle which has a larger eye or the hole that you thread it through so it actually goes a bit quicker. Then I pull the strings taut so they're doubled over, and this is the way my grandma actually showed me how to do some hand sewing. So you wrap it around your fingers and tuck that little end through to make a knot, and then pull it tight just like that. I actually like to do a double knot to thicken up the knot a bit, so I'm going to do that again, and this time actually grasping that knot you just made with your thumb and index finger, and it'll slide right onto it. Pretty cute, huh? And just to neaten things up, we're going to snip off the edge so it doesn't show up too much on the back of the project. Alright, so now we've got our hook and eye loop clasps. We're going to hold them against each other as if we're about to sew them onto the bandana, then hold them against the dog bandana, imagining where it's going to sit against each other when it's actually all looped on. Time to sew. So I like to start from the wrong side of the fabric, this just so that the knot catches at the back and you don't see it from the front. Then you pass your needle through, and you might notice there are two little semicircles to almost full circles at the base of the clasp. And what you want to do is to push your needle through, and then when you go back in to allow your stitch to actually encompass that area or surround that little piece of metal, so that it stays in place. And you probably want to stitch through at least 3 to 4 times just to keep it nice and neat and holding firmly. Now you can notice that I'm holding it away from my fingers so that when you push the needle through, you're not actually going to accidentally stab yourself with it. And once you've completed sewing those 3 to 4 stitches on either side, flip it over and turn it so that your needle can pass through all those stitches that you've just done, or a couple of them at least. And as you pull it through, loop your needle through that extra bit of string so that you're essentially tying a knot. And I like to do this about 3 times. That way the knot stays nice and firm and is a bit harder to unravel. And when you finish doing your 3 knots, take your scissors and snip it off nice and close to the edge of that knot so the ends aren't going to be dangling about or catching on anything. After you've done that, it's time to go ahead and sew on the other side. So I like to double check to make sure that the eye of the hook and the eye actually matches, and just remind myself whereabouts it's going to sit against the bandana. And you notice I've already done that double knot at the end of my string. That's why I like to keep it nice and long so I don't have to keep rethreading the same needle. And then go ahead and do the same thing, passing it from the back to the front a couple of times. That will be fantastic. Now, some great tips for sewing like this: get some good lighting. If you have like a little LED light or a desk lamp, shine it directly over your work. If you have a magnifying glass that you can somehow attach to your neck, or glasses that help you see better, this is where those things will really come in handy. Feel free to chuck on some nice music in the background. Sewing's meant to be relaxing and you just want to be in the mood for it. And while this hand sewing part can seem quite tedious, it's a pretty quick result, and all this sewing that I'm doing right now is in real time, so you could pretty much just sew along with me for this part. Now there are other ways you can attach the bandana together, such as cam snaps, which you might have seen on, for instance, baby clothes. You do require a tool to close those though, so that's why I haven't shown this video. Some people actually have a pretty cool version of that where they got to use a hammer or a presser that's attached to the table, and you might enjoy making these so much you might want to invest in one of those. But for this video I just wanted to go with the cheapest and easiest way I could think of to show you how to make a bandana. Another way you could do it is you could just make the ends a bit longer and tie off as a little knot, but it does make it a bit more difficult for the dog to slip out of that. And guess what, guys? You're done! Fantastic! It's time to try it on a model.
Oh my god, so cute!
Thank you so much for watching the video today. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment and subscribe.